Landry thinks that New Orleans isn't so special.
The state of Louisiana is tired. New Orleans thinks they're so special. They used to have 4 assessors, 2 clerks, a sheriff that ran at a different time. I mean, it just on and on. That parish is going to operate exactly like the rest of this state.
I mean, basically his stance is New Orleans needs to fall in line. Like the state is going to say what New Orleans can and can't do and what New Orleans can and can't have. He has taken a lot of steps to try to build up industry in other places, like the meta data centers in Richland, and also the ICE contracts.
Right.
Like,
all shit that people hate, but whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Welcome to Seriously, the podcast that dives into the baffling,
We can't send them to a prison where there's animals, where there's livestock.
the ridiculous,
Like omelets better than sex.
and downright unbelievable political climate in red states like Louisiana.
So we can't go there. There are no vegan jails.
Seriously.
Welcome to Seriously. We're your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we have a special treat. We've been threatening to do this for some time, but we are going to focus this podcast on Representative Beryl Amedee. I'm very excited about it.
Yes, the deep dive into Amedee,
Yes.
which actually has just occurred to me. Have you ever listened to the podcast Behind the Bastards? It's really good.
It's yeah, this will kind of be like that.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, how did this person, I mean, she's not necessarily like a bastard. I think it is usually men actually on that show, but there might be some women. But just, I've heard ones that they've done on Peter Thiel, just like Elon Musk, just sort of like people who loom large, and there must be a backstory to how this person became the kind of evil villain that they are. And that's what I feel like this is. Like, I don't know that I would say she's an evil villain. She's too mousy and ineffective, I think, to be an evil villain. But she's a fascinating character.
Yes.
And you've been doing a deep dive. So tell us, Michelle.
I know a lot of stuff about her. Well, do you have a Seriously this week that you want to talk about first?
I'm trying to think. I mean, seriously, was that I had a stomach virus, and it was really annoying. I can't really remember the last time I threw up, but I did this week. But beyond that, to tuning in and out of consciousness basically with the news and like Trump's bizarro reprise of the election from, a million years ago, the House networks wouldn't carry. And then apparently even Fox News basically didn't cover it the next day.
Yeah,
it was
so
so
weird.
incomprehensible. We just live in just such a fucking bizarre time. So it felt like just a whole week of what is real, what is fake.
Yeah.
Is this a dream or reality?
Nicole Wallace had a really interesting take on the speech because, and I had not heard anyone else say this, so I thought it was very interesting in that all of his things about the election was stolen, there was fraud. He administered that election.
Yeah, I heard.
And so the two elections that he won were administered by first Barack Obama and then Biden. Right. And those
were legitimate because he won.
Yeah.
But so the only election that he lost was the one that he administered,
including his own people who are still in the government, like John Ratcliffe. I mean, the deep state that was behind it all.
Yeah,
it must have been some underling to John Ratcliffe. I'm like, yeah, right. Like the deep state. It goes so deep that it's like the underling of the underling of the underling must be the guy who's actually controlling everything. And with Trump, then, it's always been hard to tell with him what he really believes and what he doesn't. And, some of the...
I think it's hard for him to tell.
Yeah. Well, and at this point, he's also very old. You start to believe your own bullshit. I always tease about this as a lawyer. It's like you get into danger zones always, at some point in a case with any client where you're like, I'm really believing our own bullshit here. It's I don't see the flaws in any of this argument at all. So, I get that, you're really invested in your story.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's true. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
And he's also just old. And I think whether he has dementia, I don't know, but he's not at the top of his mental game. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just like all sort of like, where does the like the gaslighting and manipulation, just the attempt to gaslight and manipulate start? And where does you actually believe that somehow the underling of the underling of the underling hit all of this,
The guy in
did
the
all this
mailroom.
shit?
Yeah.
Exactly. Did all this crap, hit it, and Tifa probably helped, you know? I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I had one that I wanted to bring up, which was Landry thinks that New Orleans isn't so special.
He also thinks that we're using the state as an ATM. Did you hear that
Yeah.
comment from me?
Yeah. So he went on this kind of rant in some press conference. And yeah, he's like, New Orleans thinks it's so special.
Used to be, the saying was, where goes New Orleans, where goes the state? Let me tell you what happened today. That has changed. Where goes Louisiana will determine the fate of New Orleans. Okay? The state of Louisiana is tired. New Orleans thinks they're so special. They used to have 4 assessors, 2 clerks, a sheriff that ran at a different time. I mean, it just on and on. That parish is going to operate exactly like the rest of this state.
I mean, basically his stance is New Orleans needs to fall in line. Like the state is going to say what New Orleans can and can't do and what New Orleans can and can't have. And I think that his theory is that New Orleans is no longer an economic driver because, I mean, he has taken a lot of steps to try to build up industry in other places like the meta data centers in Richland and also the ICE contracts.
Right. All shit that people hate, but yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, ain't
The
no
economic
NBA,
center.
like, championship going to, Shreveport even,
I
let
know.
alone like wherever, It's also, I mean, it's funny to me because, not being from here originally, being from Kentucky, and also having lived in New York for many years, this is a battle that's true in every fucking state. In most states, then, you know, there's a blue city that feels very different in its politics and its culture and its everything to the rest of the state. And most of the power of government is from the rest of the state. And there's a huge amount of conflict between that. That's true with Louisville and Kentucky. It's true with New York City and Albany, for Frankfurt and Louisville, Albany and New York City, here in Baton Rouge. Like it's just so whether New Orleans is special, what isn't special is this problem that he has.
Yes.
That like, the place that's best known and that brings the most people to the state is also somewhere that everyone else is like poo-poo.
Yeah.
Poo-poo.
It's ridiculous. All right. So Representative Beryl Amedee, she's from Terrebonne Parish, like the Homa area for our German listeners.
Right?
Terrebonne
Or any
Parish.
of our Kentucky listeners.
Yeah. Terrebonne Parish is South Louisiana, like more south than New Orleans. And the community there is like oil and gas workers and, shrimpers, fishermen, oystermen. It's a very, very conservative part of the state.
It's not that far from New Orleans,
it's
though.
not.
I mean, which, again, all of these things are very relative, and anybody who lives in a similar state will understand that, like, you don't have to get very far out of a city to feel very far. But, like, Homa is between here and Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Or at least that's where you get off,
Yeah.
I-12.
Yeah.
And the Homa itself is a native tribe.
Yes.
So it's also, there have to still be, or at least historically were, a constituency of native folks there.
That's right. That's right. So that is where she's from. She is the co-owner of a business called Forerunner Errand and Concierge. I think they just do odd jobs and run errands for people.
I should totally hire her. I've been using TaskRabbit.
Yeah. Well, you could
Oh my gosh.
you could contact
That's nuts.
Forerunner.
I'm gonna have to look
I
that
didn't
up.
find a whole lot of information about them. I don't know. Maybe it's just a front. Who knows?
Maybe.
But she's also
For
the
the cult.
pastor at the Vision Christian Center.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Yes.
If you follow her at all, we were talking about this a little before we started, then, she's got a lot of nutty ideas, but they seem true to her. Like she's an ideological, she's not being bought and paid for, although I'm sure she's a useful idiot to various malicious folks. But in light of like the, Tulsi Gabbard revelations of a person who also was like nutty and kind of like hard to understand where are these views. Hers were also because they were sometimes so divergent. Amedee's seem like there is probably more cohesion.
theme,
Yeah, yeah, more of a through line. But they're just it's often like seems so sort of dark and conspiratorial and like insular. This past session with the like people killing their children or not killing their children who have cancer or whatever. I mean, like, who is this affect? Like, where have you seen something like this?
Yeah.
That like, is she in a cult?
Yeah.
So
Well,
she's the leader of it.
She is a pastor at this church. It's like a Pentecostal, like a charismatic Pentecostal
It sounds
tradition.
It's gonna be. Are there pictures of it on Google? It's gonna look like a shitty like little warehouse or something that has.
But we'll find them.
I love
The
those
Pentecost.
churches.
I mean, that does explain her hairstyle choices.
Yeah. Well, so she believes in miracles. So that's some of her that's driving a lot of the healthcare legislation.
So
Miracle theory of medicine. I'm always teasing that's what they think with all the reproductive rights stuff that like should be driving actual policy. Miracles can happen. Yeah. And everyone must be governed by that as a matter of policy.
We don't need to actually protect the health and safety of our communities because.
And if a miracle doesn't happen, then it's because you are bad. That's right. So
sinners.
You are not worthy. Okay, so what else do we know about the new vision?
I don't know that much about that. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. It's just that's her religious background.
She's currently that, but she serves in that role.
She's
pastor.
I mean, there's probably several. The fact that they allow women is something.
It's true. I mean, she has a job. Obviously, she has 2 jobs. Just 3, apparently.
Yeah. Busy bee.
She's smart. I mean, she always strikes me, I've said this many times on this podcast, as somebody who prepares. She reads things. What she's reading, I don't know. And it's often off the hook. But like, she wants to understand things and she does a deep dive on things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes too deep. She's the chairwoman of the Louisiana Freedom Caucus. Some of the other members are who you would expect: Danny McCormick, Kathy Edmonston, Drunk Kathy, Raymond Cruz. These are the people.
Some of the usual suspects.
Yeah, she's palling around with.
Yeah.
The Freedom Caucus, they put out a statement ahead of one of the recent No Kings protests, just to remind people that a state law provides civil immunity to any driver who reasonably believes they or their passengers are in immediate danger from individuals illegally. Like, just
go ahead and
take your car down to the No Kings protest and ram into the protesters because we created like civil liability protection for you.
Yeah, you don't have criminal liability protection. These people are stupid.
Well, anyway, so she was elected to the House of Representatives in November 2015. She took office in January of 2016, and her term ends the beginning of January 28. But she's a representative, so she could run for Senate.
So she'll be term limited after this. Okay.
Yeah. She has filed 103 bills since she has been in the legislature. Only 21 of them have passed.
Interesting. I mean, not surprising, really. Yeah. I don't know how that compares to other people, honestly, but because there's such a huge range with how many bills people file and how strategic they are. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some sessions none of her legislation passed.
Yeah. Well, that was definitely the case early.
Maybe she's found some more mundane things now.
I mean, she has gotten more bills passed, kind of scarily so, in the last couple of sessions.
Well, it's also become a much more irrational, just really right.
And that's a point that I want to make, because I did kind of like an analysis of who she's most closely aligned with. And again, it's like, these Freedom Caucus.
What about Wilder?
Wilder's in there.
Yeah, because he's another.
Yeah, Cruz, Edmonston, Chuck Owen, that
I know that ilk.
Yeah. So
people who come up with ideas, in other words, I mean, some of our listeners will be well familiar with all of those characters. Like the equivalents in Congress are like the Jim Jordans of the world. I mean, he also has apparently very bad personality. Some of these people seem to have nice enough personalities. Amedee herself has a nice enough personality. But just people who come up with outlandish, just routinely, their legislation, then a lot of the body is like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are her peers.
She is fundamentally an aggressive culture war legislator. So she's really
On
focused.
health.
She's focused on baseless conspiracy theories broadly, but particularly around vaccines. She's pushing a lot of legislation to undermine trust in the medical establishment and public schools. I have this organized in themes. So
Okay.
the first one is
she does she have kids that she homeschooled? Do we know?
we're gonna get to
Okay.
that. So the first theme that Amedee has made kind of like a signature policy issue is parental rights. So let's talk about that first. Okay. This shows up again and again in a lot of her legislation, whether it's vaccines, it's a through line. It's kind of the organizing principle, I think. Back in 2023 was the first time that she introduced a constitutional amendment around parents' rights. It seems very clear that she's working with a lot of religious national organizations like the Parents' Rights Foundation, Alliance Defending Freedom, the Pro-Family Legislators Network, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And when she introduced that bill back then in the committee hearing, her opener started talking about the book of Genesis, like framing this parental authority as like
God-given.
divine. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve, and he told them to be fruitful and multiply, and they did. So from the very beginning, it's clear that the authority and the responsibility concerning children lies with parents, not governments. About 100 years ago, around 1925, the Supreme Court said the child is not the mere creature of the state. A little over 20 years ago, in 2000, the court stated that the fundamental liberty interest of a parent toward their child is the oldest of the liberties our Constitution protects. Today, as recently as last week in fact, out of frustration with government overreach, parents have begun coming to our committee hearings and repeating this phrase: "We don't co-parent with the government."
The way that she's approaching it, I mean, parental rights is a broad concept, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in not, but like the way that she's approaching it is, again, feels cult-like. Government should not be able to tell us that we have to do anything with our children.
Yeah.
We should be able to
And
raise them
if we're abusing
in
them,
a militia, not sending them to school,
Yeah.
doing what, sexually. I mean, I don't want to be accusing her of anything like that, but it has all of that kind of that kind of parental rights feel to it.
Yeah, it's bizarre. That bill actually made it out of committee. It did pass the House, but because it was a constitutional amendment, it didn't get the 2/3 majority that was required. So, I mean, obviously this is her bag, right? And because she came back again this year with another constitutional amendment.
Was the one this year basically the same as the 2023?
It was. It was, with the strict scrutiny and all of that stuff. I mean, it's basically the same thing. So it is interesting to me that the change in the committee makeup really does make a difference here, because that it did not even get out of committee then. But yeah, her underlying policy preference is let's move power away from institutions, whether that be schools, health agencies, libraries.
Like just a total skepticism of government or really of outsiders. Again, that's why it feels very insular.
Yes.
Right?
Very much so. So let's talk about homeschooling, because she's a huge homeschool, like no regulation for homeschooling. Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yes. She homeschooled her 3 sons herself.
Power to her.
Her main legislative effort was in 2024, she introduced House Bill 550. This would have ended the State Education Board, BESI's, approval process for homeschool curricula. So basically replacing it with, you just have to notify them that you're going to homeschool and the name of your child, your address, and how many kids you're enrolling in your home.
Which, I mean, I'm sure in her preferred world, you wouldn't even have to do that. The government wouldn't even have any authority to tell people that you have to educate your children up to the age of 16. That's the law in our country.
Yes.
Can't make them work on the farm, can't make them do whatever.
That bill did make it out of committee. It squeaked out. It did not pass on the floor. There were a lot of abstentions on that bill, which is
Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah. A lot of times with her stuff, then there's like a kernel of it to me that I can find that makes sense. Like, I don't know a lot about the regulations, Bessie's regulations on homeschooling, but I can imagine that they might be onerous, that like just sort of regulatory overreach or whatnot. Like, that wouldn't surprise me. Maybe that it's a little much.
It was eight pages of guidance that she said was
Like doctrinal.
unnecessary bureaucracy,
Yeah.
and it's standing between parents and a choice that they're entitled to make.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is what I mean, that like there's a part of it that seems like there might be a logic to it, but she always takes it to the conclusion where any reasonable person is, no, but I mean, this is government protecting children, though, that like you shouldn't just be able. Yeah, I mean, like this is this child's education, like period. They're not going to get any other, high school education. Otherwise, maybe you don't have to teach your kids to read.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have to teach them math. Maybe you just teach them cooking. I don't know.
The Bible.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Whatever. Like, I mean, why do we have any public school standards? Why do we have any standards?
Yeah. I don't know if you've watched The Testament, which is like the follow up to The Handmaid's Tale. It's really focused on the children in Gilead. And yeah, like the girls are going to school to learn how to embroider and set a table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if it weren't, which a lot of times it obviously in these worlds would be, very gender driven and whatnot. But regardless, whatever, any random parent like this, because the parent doesn't have to have any specialized training. The parent doesn't have to have specialized knowledge. The parent could be a fucking idiot who just doesn't want to send their kids to school for whatever reason. That becomes child abuse. Educational neglect is also a form of child abuse.
I agree.
No, I mean, it literally is, Michelle, under the law. We've talked about the medical neglect is with Amedee. So is educational neglect.
Yeah.
In
that's
other
how,
words,
like,
Parents get in trouble when their kids are consistently
exactly.
yeah.
And particularly if it's a good way of isolating children, it's a good way of punishing, just like all of that is child abuse when taken to a certain level. So like, again, she's not at all concerned with that. Like, there's a reason that these standards and laws, why there are outer limits to what a parent is allowed to do before it becomes abusive and detrimental to a child's physical and or mental well-being.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of pushback on that policy by Representative Barbara Freiberg, who herself spent 10 years on the Bessie School Board. And so, yeah, she kind of went at her.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Amedee, I know there are wonderful homeschool programs in this state, and I know many young people who've gone through them. In fact, my son-in-law is one of them who did elementary school at home. But I worked for Bessie for 10 years, and we were the agency that at that time handled the homeschool and the approved homeschool. And I know for certain that there were homeschool programs that let us know they were homeschool programs where the person that wrote the notification couldn't even write a sentence. I just have a lot of concern about not having a standard for homeschools that are approved. And so I'm very concerned. And basically, a parent certifies that a child has completed coursework and therefore gets a diploma. That diploma is issued by the parent.
Yes, ma'am, just like a private school diploma is
And so colleges
issued
and
by a school.
universities would be required with your legislation to recognize a diploma that is issued by a parent who designed the curriculum, taught the curriculum, and so forth at home. Is that correct?
Correct, and they already do. Yes, ma'am. That's been in place for many years.
But there are no exams, there are no end of course, there's nothing that is required because the homeschooler, the parent designs the entire program, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Has Amedee done other homeschool stuff?
Yes. Let me talk about this other one that's next on my list. So she championed a bill in 2024 called the School Chaplain Bill. This is House Bill 334. This allows volunteer chaplains to serve in public schools. Her kids aren't in these public schools, but she thinks it's really important for schools to be able to have a chaplain in there. That is completely inappropriate, I think. I mean, we have school counselors, we have like licensed people that to support kids. If your kid needs a
spiritual leader,
spiritual advisor, then take them to church.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if that's the route you're going down, you need a lot of different religious leaders.
Yeah.
But I just would also imagine with her, and when you're talking about being a volunteer chaplain, like who is this person too? Like what kind of credentials does this person have? Who is deciding who this volunteer is and what role they have?
I mean, that bill passed, and there were some regulations placed around that in the process of that bill passing. Thank God. Sure. But the way that she introduced it was just like, yeah, willy-nilly, anybody could just show up and say, hey, I'm a pastor, I want to hang out with the kids.
Right, exactly. I would think too, in the general irony of folks like this, that the volunteer part is probably also that schools can have it or not have it. But in her world, she would want it to be mandatory. It's mandatory that public schools have this person.
Yes. But I mean, she is deep in this religification of public schools. Like, people who don't want to put their kids in public schools should be able to do whatever the hell they want with them in homeschooling. Right. But if your kids are in public school, like, we want as much Christian influence into those schools as possible. Like, lots and lots of
Christian nationalism.
Yes. So, and on that front, last year, House Bill 371. So this was a bill that amends our Preservation of Religious Freedom Act, that basically like Louisiana's RFRA, right? So that law, as it existed prior to this legislation, the idea is just that like government can't substantially burden someone's religious exercise unless it has a compelling interest and uses the least restrictive
Yeah,
means.
it's sort of like a statutory version of what the First Amendment does. And it applies in some contexts, it's very helpful to people, like in prisons.
Absolutely.
So RFRA has some laudable applications and also some nutball ones.
Yes. The amended version that she introduced, it felt like a lot of the conversation around it was to protect churches from the COVID shutdowns. Like there was a lot of that kind of swirling around, but it also did a couple other things that I think are worth mentioning, because there's a lot in here about religious education. Like, it now protects religious education as if it's religious exercise. It puts a bunch of limits on how much the government can interfere with religious schools and instruction. It lets religious schools and educators challenge any regulations that they see as burdensome, including adding a private right of action. So, yeah, any of these religious schools or educators can sue for damages if they think that their rights have been infringed.
And this passed.
Yes.
Yeah, that probably is some. I mean, in Kentucky, there were cases where like Bashir was like, in a death match with some nutball Christian schools that wanted to be in session in person. I mean, there were cases like that in the country in general, but there were some big ones in Kentucky. So that probably is sort of where it's coming from. That like in certain situations, just because you're a religious school, then you can be like, fuck you to the government for no other reason than like, we're a religious school.
Well, that's 100% what this is. It's like, it's couched as, well, we don't want our schools to be shut down in another COVID-like situation. But the solution that they've crafted is so broad that it basically inoculates them from basically any oversight whatsoever.
This all makes sense. I remember last year I was talking about that. It's like, why are these people still legislating on COVID? Because like, I mean, it's because it was all, I guess, when you think about it from their perspective, it was like all of their worst fears coming true. I mean, it was all of our worst fears coming true for a million different reasons, you know, but for them in terms of like the government really telling you what to do
Yeah.
in a way that they didn't agree with. So like they've never lost the steam, certain ones of them, like Amity, Wilder,
Yeah.
where it's like even years later, I'm like, why are we
They're
still
still
like doing
obsessed.
this? Like this
Mhm.
is like probably not going to happen again in our lifetime.
Yeah.
But yeah, with stuff like this too, that like, I mean, it gives them, because there's enough of a constituency in that body and
Mhm.
enough of a constituency of people that are like, that was bullshit. That, yeah, who knows how this can be
Yep.
sort of applied. That's interesting. I mean, we may never know in Louisiana because we don't have, mandatory sex education. But let's say in like a ideal world where our state joined, the 22nd century is when the only time this will probably happen, and it has mandatory sex, then like Catholic schools or whatever schools, like, can they sue on that infringes on?
This wouldn't apply to them.
But I mean, that's a choice.
Yeah.
There's no, I mean, much of curriculum applies to religious
Mhm.
schools the same
But
as
there's
to,
also
I mean,
in general,
the
yeah.
irony, of course, everybody who I know in Catholic schools raised in New Orleans is like, we got great sex ed at Catholic schools. Like they're pretty good schools.
Mhm.
And so they're just, giving people the
Yeah.
information they need.
I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
talk about contraception or abortion, but
They
they did talk about
definitely contraception, the folks I know.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I don't know about abortion. It's a good question.
Probably not.
It's probably not. Or
Right.
probably a lot.
She also jumped on the library bandwagon. So in 2023, she co-sponsored several bills trying to give local governments power over public libraries, requiring, parish libraries to adopt all kinds of policies restricting minors' access to obscene materials.
Which was basically most things that were LGBTQ adjacent.
Right.
There's also I think it was in Tangipahoa Parish that there's that pretty famous librarian now that came under all like, local and national threats, like was thrust into the spotlight in a way that she was not. She was just trying to do her job. Yeah, these woke librarians.
Well, I mean, it's just, again, this is very clear that she's in this ecosystem of the crazies
Yeah.
that are freaking out about weird stuff, and she latches onto it very quickly.
Yeah.
And then like a year or two later we see it sort of in the mainstream conversation, but she's an early adopter
Interesting.
of,
Yeah.
of a lot of this weird stuff.
Well, because again, the through line is keeping things insular.
Yeah.
Particularly with children,
Mhm.
that like they don't have access to anything other than what we as the parents or the religious leaders want them to. And that there's all these outside forces, like you said, outside institutions that are trying to interfere.
Right.
Including, yeah, like that you might just like fucking find a book at the library.
Yeah.
Or a librarian who's like, hi, what are you looking for? Let me show you that section.
I'll just say
Those people should be thrown in jail.
There's
those
also a
librarians.
lot of really obscene stuff that I don't think is suitable for children in the Bible itself. Um,
Parents are always, I mean, I don't know if this has been true with all of the, extremely disturbing stuff that's been happening again in our country with book banning. Like, there's no good history in the world, particularly amongst the Nazis with book banning, and in our own country, like in the 50s. But also, kids by their very nature are drawn to things that you draw their attention to as being bad. So like, I mean, I guess if you just take the books off the shelf, but like that assumes again that you have your kid homeschooled where nobody hears that this exists, that they don't have internet access, they don't have peer, I mean, which I guess could be true depending on how you're raising them. But like at some stage of this like nonsense, it's very counterproductive. I mean, I wasn't raised in an environment like that at all, but we were fascinated by like the banned book lists. Like we wanted to read as many of those books as possible. And that was supported in the educational environment I was in.
Yeah.
So we were talking about books like, The Catcher in the Rye, like Catch-22. I mean, just like literary classics. But I mean, that's just kind of what teenagers are like. So you're just really kind of like, I don't know what Beryl Amedee was like as a teenager, but hello, folks.
I don't know. I mean, but yeah, you're totally right. I mean, one of my favorite books that I ever read when I was young was Fahrenheit 451, which is all about book banning.
Right. Yeah.
Because it just was so horrifying to me.
Most of the curriculum in my English classes would have been on banned book
Yeah.
list. I mean, it's the basic stuff that
Yeah.
people need to read, but
Yeah.
I mean, I would have sought that stuff out even if I'd been in a different environment.
Yeah.
So,
For sure.
maybe it's like sex though. If kids don't know about books,
That's true.
it makes more sense with books than it does with sex.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
Our bodies are our bodies. You're gonna figure something out about sex along the way.
other thing is that, I mean, at this point, the attention span of young people is so short
No,
that
they
we just
barely
don't
can't
even have
read
to worry
books.
about them reading books
No.
anymore to begin with.
And the internet has
Yeah.
which there's also some, I think, crazy ideas around that legislature about internet restrictions, but some version of that makes a lot more sense in terms of where children are going to be harmed with information, including about insane conspiracy
That's right.
theories.
She was early to become obsessed with transgender girls participating in school sports.
Interesting.
So back in 2020, she actually introduced, I think, the first bill related to the gender of school athletics teams. It didn't even get a hearing. And then she brought it back in 2021. And because she is not an effective legislator, her bills did not end up
Being the ones
being
that
the one that
passed.
moved. It was like Beth Mizell bringing it. It was like other people were finally able to.
But again, the early adopters.
But she was early to the party on that.
Was it the same sort of protecting women? What was the rationale?
Yeah, it was like, I mean, they're basically the same. They're Alliance Defending Freedom bills, right? And obviously,
They've got her on speed dial.
they're like whatever speed dial. Nobody has speed dial anymore, Ellie.
They
So
do.
funny. But yeah, I mean, they're sending her this stuff. They're like, oh yeah, we know that Beryl down in Louisiana, like she'll be on board with this, and she's like, huh, bringing this. But anyway, so she brought those. Her bills ultimately weren't the ones that.
So she doesn't have a history of a lot of anti-abortion bills. I don't think really any.
No, we have one.
Okay.
I found one.
But she's obviously like a very unreliable vote for us. I mean, again, like there's, her views on all of those things are predictable.
Yeah.
She's not somebody that we would even really, consider as, I mean, again, not that somebody who maybe you couldn't work with on some things, maybe, but not on most things health related. But that's not really her jam.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that the transgender stuff was like,
Yeah.
I think it was
In her
I think it's
really in
I,
her wheelhouse.
I think it's more
gender roles, though.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe
I don't think that this isn't part of her canon necessarily, but it is very obvious to me that like the organizations that are involved in a lot of this reshaping America to be more Christian, traditional, blah blah blah, like she's their gal, like for sure. And it's not like there aren't other, I mean, there are plenty of them in our legislature, but she's definitely one of them.
It makes sense. I mean, it's probably just literally like, we have legislators we work with. If you're already pitching ideas, you're like, and how about this? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm used to introducing bills that don't pass.
Yeah.
Throw it on in.
Give me the thing to read at the,
Yeah.
at the hearing.
Exactly.
All right. I have before we get into what she's really, really known for, I have one more that came up this year that it was not on my radar, but our listener, Morgan Lamondre, flagged this one for me. So this was House Bill 1025. Morgan dubbed this the "she was asking for it" bill.
Yeah.
Okay. This bill is fucked. And I have a clip that we can play. It's about protective orders, and what the change that she wanted to make was to add a new affirmative defense for violating a protective order. So if the protected person voluntarily initiated contact, or if the defendant didn't initiate contact, or if the protected person consented to the contact. So this is the victim reached out first would be a legal defense. So then it shifts the burden back onto the victim or the survivor, and could easily be exploited by abusers and would be exploited, because who determines whether the contact is voluntary or whether they're pressured, or especially in a situation where you're sharing custody of, a kid, and it's like, anyway.
Sometimes I give Amedee too much credit, but like, I can imagine where she's coming from. She's also like, she's one of these folks like Raymond Chris. It's also because they're working with like the ADF, like that they're playing lawyers on TV.
They're armchair lawyers.
Yes, exactly. Where it's like making something an affirmative defense is a whole big thing in the law. Like it has like a lot of sort of affirmative place in the law. Like those are facts that are going to bear out. Like whether someone violated a protective order or not is not just an absolute black and white thing, particularly in a situation like you're talking about, where there is some necessity for ongoing contact, right? So like those facts are just going to come into play in any sort of case. Like, so trying to sort of formalize that in the law, I don't know, like what are you doing? How's that going to work?
Well, I mean, it could be very detrimental. And so I'm going to play you how she introduced the bill and how Representative Debbie Villio, the chair of the committee, reacted to it.
House Bill 1025 deals with protective orders. Protective orders serve a vital role in safeguarding individuals from harm in domestic disputes. However, the current framework often creates unintended barriers to family reconciliation when both parties later recognize that the order was sought in the heat of the moment. Life's pressures, financial strain being one of the most common examples, can escalate ordinary disagreements into crisis. In the midst of acute stress, a spouse may file for a protective order after heated words are exchanged. The restrained party is then instantly barred from their home, their personal belongings, and all forms of contact, including indirect communication through family or friends. The problem arises when the filing spouse has a change of heart and wishes to reach out. Under existing law, any response from the restrained party, even a single text message expressing a willingness to talk, could result in arrest. As a result, genuine efforts at reconciliation are effectively prohibited until the full court process concludes, which is often weeks or even months later. Families deserve both protection when it's needed and the opportunity to heal when both parties choose reconciliation.
Representative Amedee, the red cards are going to speak for themselves. What I will say to you is no matter how you paint it, I believe your bill is quite misguided and harmful. Protection orders are vital to keeping victims safe and holding offenders accountable for abusive behavior. To allow abusers to circumvent the law and avoid accountability for violating a protective order is very, very dangerous.
Villio's body language that whole time, and now I get where she's coming. It is even more misguided than I was imagining, particularly because again, it's like, I mean, I was expecting Villio to say this, but she knows this. I mean, a protective order is like the same thing as an injunction. Like they can be rescinded. Anyone can go to court and say like, you know what, like first of all, the whole notion that this is happening in a like heat of the moment, willy-nilly way is already offensive and dangerous, right? But that's how women basically are getting protective orders, is like either in a weaponized way.
It's actually quite difficult. I've had several women in my life who have.
I've represented a friend of ours' sibling and failed to get a protective order. Yes. So that's already just like a very false narrative of both how hard it is to get one and what circumstances women are seeking them in. But regardless of that, then like with any other order, you can go to the court. The parties can go to the court and say, will you please, the court's not going to be like, we're keeping this protective order in place. In her scenario, husband and wife say like, you know, their lawyers say, your lawyers can talk to each other, you know, we want to try to work things out, rescind the protective order. There's legal remedies for that. Plus in this whole scenario, then also someone has to be going back to the court to say this person violated the protective order. So the only way that it's going to work out, like she's saying, is either if the person got the supposed consent was like a bait to then like get the person to violate it, or that it was misinterpreted. Like the court's not around, like the police aren't around to be like swooping in and enforcing protective orders. If both parties have decided that they don't want this anymore, everybody can also just start ignoring it.
Yeah, but the thing is, and this is what Morgan explained to me, is that what she would be doing with this is creating something in law that if the abuser then, further abused or even killed, he could go to court and say, I have a text message. She reached out to me. I have a text message. And that's an affirmative defense that he didn't violate the protective order,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what she's doing here. That's why Villia was so upset about
the whole thing is absurd. I mean, just because, again, a lot of things are going to happen in situations with a protective order if you have an ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
Like, you may have to communicate through a third party. There may be some things that are confusing. If you're ever in a situation where that is then being enforced, it's because that person did something bad.
Yes.
So, not because then they responded to a text message to your sister, that said, sure, I'll pick the kids up 3 blocks down instead. Like, that's not how, that scenario is not going to play out in the way that she's describing it, ever.
Yeah. So anyway, this is like another example of, I don't know what's going on in the community that she is existing in, but like, there's a lot of apologies being made for abuse.
A lot.
Yes.
Again, we've already gone through medical neglect, educational neglect, and this is just physical and or sexual violence with adults or children.
Yeah.
Because the lady in the family obviously overreacted, Michelle, and went out and willy-nilly got a protective order, and they need that. Man, they need the patriarch.
They were having a disagreement about who was going to do the dishes, and
just your regular old protective orders flying around willy-nilly, and then the family cannot reconcile. The law is preventing them from. I mean, just again, it's like
crazy.
It's very crazy.
Okay, well, this is what she's really known for. She is one of the premier anti-vaxxers in the legislature, even before COVID.
Yeah, I was asking you
Amedee was
before.
showing her skepticism about health mandates and introducing legislation aimed at vaccines. So in 2019, she introduced some legislation. 2017, she had introduced legislation around the meningitis vaccine.
Which is what? I mean, that's not mandated, is it? Meningitis?
It was on the schedule. Yeah.
I mean, it's extremely contagious and extremely devastating. People die. When there are outbreaks in colleges, people die within days.
Yeah. This one was interesting, the 2017 one, because it was also homeschool related. So if you're just homeschooling your own children, that's one thing. But a lot of these communities, there's a community of homeschoolers, right? And so if that's the situation, then they have to follow some public health guidelines as well. And
that makes sense.
And the meningitis,
again, because
documentation of immunization against meningitis was part of that regulation. That's what she was trying to rescind.
I see.
Yes.
I'm sure she thinks that there should be no sort of public health regulation of those sort of groups.
Yeah.
Which again, from a public health standpoint, it is literally no different.
Yeah.
Like whether you're getting 15-year-olds in this living room together every day, or it's in the school down the street, that makes literally no difference for germ spreading purposes.
Well, and quite frankly, you're kind of more likely to get some, pathogens spreading amongst the homeschoolers because they're obviously not complying with a lot of government regulations in general.
Yes, although maybe not going anywhere.
I don't want to make any
I know. So again, I mean, I don't have any personal friends who've homeschooled their kids, but I think there are reasonable people who would choose that. To me, it seems crazy.
It's not reasonable at all.
I mean, again, you're not socializing your kids, which is why it would make sense to do it this way. Anyway, it's not. It would never be for me or most people I know, but I don't think it's beyond the pale that people could do it in a reasonable way. But not when we're just in the prairie. Yeah. Or just Little House on the Prairie.
Yes.
Which is kind of how she dresses.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. It's Pentecostal, it's like puritanical. I was doing this stuff before COVID, but then since COVID, she has authored or co-sponsored dozens of bills related to vaccine mandates, exemptions, informed consent. And again, it's all framed around parental rights, informed consent, bodily autonomy, like medical choice.
Is it always really about kids? Is it always focused on? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
I remember some of hers. It does seem like that. I mean, again, it makes sense to make that their focus. It's a vulnerable group that you can control and indoctrinate. I'm sure she was in on some of the COVID. Yeah. I mean, if not proposing, then at least big supporter of no mandates at all.
A lot of it is, focused on mandates. But I mean, she's taken a lot of interesting tacks. So some of it is like, the government can't mandate this stuff. And then some of it is like, if your employer tells you have to do this, then it's a violation of your rights and then you can sue. It's basically every single legal pathway to destroying our vaccine.
And every legal word, I'm sure, has been used in these bills over time.
Yeah. So
strict scrutiny, affirmative defense.
So one of the early ones was around schools and vaccines. So this was House Bill 428. The bill prohibits the state Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, BESI, the Department of Education, and also any public school officials from recommending any vaccine or medical procedure. Recommending.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're not prescribing anything. They're not administering anything.
Or mandating.
Yeah.
So health officials still could?
Or health officials
still but not school.
could, but not. Yeah. So I'm going to play this because she gives a weird example on the House floor. And so this is an exchange between her and Representative Mike Johnson. He's not a bleeding heart liberal. He's very, very conservative.
This is the current Mike Johnson, not old Mike Johnson.
Right.
Not my Mike Johnson. No. Not now Speaker of the House.
Not Johnson. Right?
Yeah.
So this one's a little more of a sleeper. He's just a quiet conservative around there.
Yes, but anyway, he's even skeptical of this. So let's play their exchange on the House floor.
What's the problem that you've experienced or seen that this bill's necessary to solve?
It's twofold. In the simple day-to-day routine happenings, some of the scenarios that were brought to me were things such as a teacher recommending that a child who seemed hyper be placed on Ritalin. And so when the parents did place the child on Ritalin, the school was required to pay for the Ritalin. And should the child have experienced any adverse reaction, the school would also be liable for the health of the child. So that's a day-to-day routine.
But a teacher can't prescribe medication.
No, but the teacher recommended.
They had to go to a doctor that prescribed it, though, right?
Right. I'm not an attorney. I don't know how it was that the school was put on the hook.
Teachers can't prescribe medication.
Right. They cannot.
I don't even know what she's talking about.
I don't either. There's many, many parents that will be excited to hear that public schools have to be covering their children's medications, the cost of them. Like there's just no way that basically any part of that story is true.
It's so crazy.
I mean, maybe a teacher recommended that. Also, it's not vaccine related.
No.
This is teachers recommending anything healthcare related.
It was vaccinations and any medical procedures.
Great.
Any medical.
What about your kid seems to have broken their arm today at school? Mm-hmm. Do they say that? You should take them to the emergency room.
With her legislation, I mean, this failed, luckily. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it would have to be the school nurse could say that, but anybody else at the school who wasn't a medical provider. Anyway, she's insane. Okay, she's got a couple other ones. One was making sure that immunization records were included in the autopsy reports.
Oh, I remember this. I don't know. I don't think that passed, did it?
Well, it got out of committee, but it did not pass.
I don't remember following that one close, but I started being like, oh my God, of course. It's just because it also, that has although the topic is different, has the feel of a lot of the anti-abortion legislation where you're just like, why are these things being related? Mm-hmm. Why would a person's immunization records be required to be part of an autopsy report?
So that they could then draw some inferences that this baby died because they were vaccinated.
I'm sure that all of that is private, but just by saying that it has to be included, you're getting farther steps down the conspiracy theory.
Yes.
Right? That may be part of the cause of death.
Yeah.
Okay. You should put in that what should be mandated is any history of child abuse. because that's pretty likely to have been related to
denial of life-saving medical care.
Exactly.
Yes. She does love the civil liability thing, which is like obvious that she's been talking to the Alliance Defending Freedom because this is their thing too.
And it is, and it's true when I think about them, is it's like when I'm always making fun of like, but in a dystopian way, all their legislation, like in Texas, where it's like, and it has the this and the this and the that and then that. That's how this legislation always is. Like double affirmative defense, and then with strict scrutiny, and you can only appeal it to this court. And just like, or it's like, this is just like, who came up with this? Yeah, they did.
They did. And Amedee loves it. So this is about refusal of medical services. So no business, employer, person, political subdivision, public official, state agency, healthcare provider, or any other entity shall do any of the following based on a person's refusal to receive certain medical services: deny or terminate employment, deny a service, including public service, deny access to commerce, segregate the person, penalize the person, or use financial coercion, discriminate against the person, including any imposition, requirement, or burden, which is, of course, not defined. I mean,
this is a pretty recent one.
Yeah, this is
2024.
Yeah, I remember it seeming very vaccine related, but of course, it's not limited to that. I mean, I don't know what other situation this would apply to, but like, because when else does anyone give a shit about anybody? Any public official give two shits about anybody else's like medical history? But like, yeah, I mean, you can't. Like basically like a malicious actor, just a shitty person who had the bubonic plague, like walk into the Super Bowl and no one could do anything about it, like either in real time or afterwards. The other person can't be removed. Like I bought a ticket and I'm telling everyone I'm here to spread the bubonic plague, and the law says that person can sue you and he's removed from private property. I mean,
It's crazy town. Okay, here's another one. This was also 2024 was a banner year for her. She had several bills. This one requests that LDH conduct a study to examine the relationship between unexpected deaths of infants and children and the administration of vaccines. So that's why they wanted in the
autopsy
previous or the same year they wanted the immunization records and the autopsy reports. Okay. Last year was creating the crime of intentional exposure of self-spreading pathogens.
I was just thinking about this when it was so weird, but we talked about it a little bit, and we might have played some clips of it. I mean, like, I don't even understand. I mean, again, usually, so maybe early adopter will see where this. It seems kind of in the same vein as like the jet fuel. What was it? What's the chemtrails? It's like in the same, but like in our water system. Yeah, I thought maybe it was about putting vaccines in the water system, which again, expensive. Who's doing that? Or if there's a bad actor that's actually putting a pathogen, I mean, you will get into a lot of trouble for doing that.
Yeah, but there's also existing laws that
100%
criminalize that behavior.
Yeah, I mean, up to and including that it would be terrorism in lots of situations.
It's 100%.
So that was just this year, right? So if she
last year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if she is a harbinger of things,
that's what I'm saying. Some of this stuff this is why we're doing this episode. We need to keep an eye on Beryl because she's early. Okay.
Behind the bastards.
Okay, we talked already a little bit about her attempt to roll back meningitis vaccine requirements. So she did this in 2017 related to the homeschoolers. She came back this year. Let's just give it, just take it off of the state recommendation because RFK.
I mean, when we were kids, for sure, then, at least in Kentucky, which is, it was more liberal back then, but it's never been like a liberal state in my lifetime. You were required to get vaccines to go to school.
Yes.
I mean, that's true, I think, here still.
Yes.
But there are a lot of exemptions. I'm sure also for stupid conscience. Like, basically, Beryl could get her kids out of this shit, I think, pretty much in a lot. I mean, maybe not in every school would they take your kids, but you would not be forced to homeschool your children in this state, even if you didn't want to, whether your peers would appreciate that you were in that school, like what I think that, again, with the what is the problem you're trying to solve, even for the few outlier people that she is representing, there's a workaround for most of them.
100%. Well, let me just say how she presented the bill, and then I have a couple of clips. So she argued that the updated CDC guidance under RFK no longer requires this vaccine. So it's not on their recommended schedule for healthy, low risk students, and that like we should just trust parents' judgment. So just to be clear, like the immunization schedule that came out, it does no longer universally include vaccines against flu, COVID, rotavirus, hepatitis A, B, or meningitis.
Which the public health community in general has blasted, of course, these new recommendations, but
that's
whatever.
But they're saying, oh, well, since this is no longer on their recommendation.
Because they were dying to listen to the CDC under Fauci, right?
Yeah.
So now that we've got our kook in there, everyone should be listening to this. Now the CDC is like,
now all of a sudden the CDC is the word of God.
Putting out the gospel.
That's right. Okay, so this comes up in committee, and I have an exchange between Amedee and Representative Kim Carver, who I don't know very well. He's a real goofy looking guy, wears bow ties, he's bald, and he's got a really great accent. And he's also very, very, very conservative and not with us on anything, but has a reasonable question to ask. So let's listen to that.
Thank you.
Can parents opt out of this vaccine now for certain exemptions before their kids go to K through 12 or higher ed in Louisiana?
Yes, in statute, the same opt-out provision applies to all students, including higher ed, and it can be for philosophical reasons or medical contraindications, and it applies to this immunization also. But the reason that we would still like to align with the federal recommendation and take it off of the list that's required broadly for all healthy students and not just for those in high-risk categories is because as long as it's on the list, there is that element of pressure and sometimes even coercion, and parents feel compelled to sometimes just adhere to the requirement going against their better judgment. And when there is no side effect that becomes evident, they feel like they breathe a sigh of relief. But whenever side effects occur, then they have regret. So instead of requiring parents to have to deal with the pressure of having to take action to opt out, if we remove it from the mandated list, then the parents who want to pursue that immunization for their child are still free to, and the doctors are still free to promote it, and insurance is still free to cover it as wherever it does.
So that's questionable whether insurance is going to still cover it.
That's true, and it has been a question. I mean, again, I'm sure she knows one person that this happened to, and also that it sounds like their kid was fine, and they just breathed a sigh of relief afterwards since there were no side effects. You can even see, with the people on this committee that are not the most progressive, the wheels are turning, or it's I don't know, also maybe then people are aware that, this is a good idea with it being on the list. A lot of people don't, you have to be researching, not everyone is a Beryl Amedee who will go to their child. In fact, almost no one is, and certainly not your regular working parents that, they've done their own research to know what are all the possible vaccines that I might ask my doctor to give my child, and which ones might I want to opt into, which ones might I want to opt out. You're going to want to know what are the recommendations, you may have some questions. I mean, I didn't actually know that there was, just now we're talking about, I didn't know that there was a vaccine for meningitis. It's a very good idea.
Yeah.
How not?
So in this hearing, that crazy Jill woman.
Yes. Well, her organization is an anti-vax organization.
That's their whole thing.
Yeah.
So she came up to the table and she testified.
They've got to be best friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, Jill's seems more city. She seems more like a Baton Rouge gal, probably not a New Orleans gal, but I bet she didn't homeschool. The name of that organization too has a deceptive, it's smartly named. It's like Families for Health or something.
Exactly.
Something that sounds like could be good, could be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an anti-vax.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to play an exchange between her and Drunk Kathy, because Drunk Kathy's on this committee, and just I love Drunk
This
Kathy.
must be in education now then. I mean, education is also a crazy committee in the House. Health and welfare is a big committee, and so it's a lot of where, just in that room, there's a lot of legislators. It's a big room. There's lots of people. We're there often. And there's been a lot of these anti-vax bills over the years. And they're always some of the craziest. That committee, which is, it's pretty easy to get some very, very bad health ideas out of, then a lot of these bills die there.
Yeah.
And you and I have sat through many of those hearings, which is how we know this lady, Jill.
Yeah.
But it's always kind of amazing where it's like, okay, some sense starts settling into some of these people that wait, what?
Wait,
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the room will be packed.
Yeah.
All anti-vaxxed people.
Yes. Okay, so let's listen to Drunk Kathy and Jill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hines. We've done a lot of work in this state on vaccinations. It took a while, but I think we have some really good things in place. In your opinion, has that do parents still believe or not that they have to get their children vaccinated as per the list?
I'm so glad you asked that, because another piece of information that I emailed the committee, you all should have it, is a letter that the parent received when she took her daughter in for a well child visit. And at that well child visit, the nurse or whoever presented the state's vaccine schedule as a matter of informed consent and said, this is what your child needs to attend school. And I have that in the email to you. So in my opinion, medical doctors, physicians, nurses, clinics that administer vaccines are going by what the state recommends and not what the child necessarily needs.
So do we have more work to do to emphasize the law that we have in place?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Yeah. That was a recurring theme. This is why this is kind of coming back to me. Again, these are public health good ideas for a reason. There are workarounds if you have a good reason or a bad reason for not wanting to do them.
Yep.
The meningitis one is interesting too, with also Amedee and her, in addition to not being a lawyer, she's not a doctor also. With if you're a healthy child, that's exactly the kid that needs a meningitis vaccine. Meningitis is mostly spreading from making out. That's why in colleges, making out with people, drinking after people, being it's like mono, but deadly, in a close environments. If your kid is at low risk and healthy and a social person, they need the vaccine.
Well, and also just the risk, this is what's so stupid about this is some of the arguments that they make in these hearings on these issues is we're not seeing widespread outbreaks of these diseases. And it's because we have the vaccines, you fucking idiots. And also low risk. I'm low risk because a lot of people are vaccinated.
Yeah.
That risk calculation is going to change significantly if a significant proportion of the population is not vaccinated.
Also, again, a parent just deciding whether their kid is high or low risk for something is probably not the best approach.
Jill, you can't trust the doctors because they're just giving you the state list and telling you got to do that. I mean, you can't trust anybody else. You can't trust anybody. They're all trying to kill you.
That's right.
But this is why fundamentally, and this is our last topic, Amedee cares about the right to bodily autonomy.
Yeah. In certain situations, yes. The co-opting of this whole framework and phraseology, which I'm sure we've talked about on the show. Certainly, in these committee hearings, you and me and everyone near me as I'm preparing is leaning on anything can you fucking believe this? The language that has been adopted by these people about bodily autonomy in the same hearing while we're waiting on a bill that is stripping people of their reproductive freedom. And they talk about it without irony, and I think without awareness. I don't think that they even really, they certainly don't care, but I don't think they even realize the unbelievable irony.
Yeah. I mean, they're invoking it forcefully on vaccine refusals, medical mandates, gender affirming care regulations, but explicitly abortion is walled off from that conversation.
Yes.
So much so that Amedee introduced this constitutional amendment in 2022, which was like the right of individuals to bodily autonomy.
Yeah, which will include thing probably would have with this, like so far, if it like like a private business owner couldn't say that like during COVID or anything, you can't come on my private property if you're not vaccinated.
Right.
Would that be a good business decision for somebody? I don't know.
Yeah.
But should you be allowed to do that? Maybe you're immunocompromised as the owner of that store. Like, is your bodily autonomy being infringed upon if like one rogue kind of nutball store owner has some specific health requirements? I've made this joke before. I mean, growing up in Kentucky, like no shirt, no shoes, no service was seen on many doors, many convenience stores.
Because
That's
Kentucky
infringing
people
on my.
We're trying to go into a lot of
That's
stores shirtless.
infringing on and
without shoes.
shoeless. That's
Without
infringing on my bodily autonomy.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Bodily autonomy to wear no shoes and be as dirty in your store as I want.
So the first time that she introduced one of these bodily autonomy bills was in 2021. And in that same hearing, she introduced House Bill 578, which was the abortion pill reversal bill.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
A very conspiracy theory too.
So again, this was framed as informed consent, that it was just about informing people who were going through medication abortion procedure that could be interrupted and reversed using this protocol. They wanted LDH to put that information on its website, and for people at the abortion clinics to have to be given information directing them to LDH's website.
I totally don't remember this being an Amedee bill. I mean, I remember this bill because I remember what went down in the Senate then with Senator Mills, like, who was a pharmacist and a reasonable person, even though he is a Republican. But, he was so upset about that bill.
Yes.
But it started in the House. Yeah, we were already pretty far down the road by then. Okay, yeah.
All right, so I've got a couple of clips from that hearing to play you. So the first one is Hughes.
I read your bill, so just for clarity, you're basically seeking to require LDH to promote information about the use of a medication that is not supported by major medical associations and a protocol that has not been evaluated by the FDA. Is that accurate?
Not quite. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure. The doctors are going to speak to the medical side of it, but progesterone is commonly used in pregnancy. And we have several case studies that we're going to present with our doctors that show that it is a safe and effective use.
But you would agree this has not been evaluated by the FDA. That is correct, right?
Progesterone has been evaluated by the FDA and is commonly used in pregnancy.
Good job, Angie, with the total deflection on that one.
Yeah.
Progesterone is a normal product. It is a hormone in our system. Women have progesterone in their bodies already, used during pregnancy.
Her answer to that was so deceptive. Like, progesterone has been evaluated by the FDA, not for this, not for this purpose.
Yeah. Progesterone is used in pregnancy is also just like what they mean, of course, is that at times if you're at risk of losing a pregnancy, like further along, you can give progesterone that will like help to slow labor, basically. So like, and again, it's a natural hormone.
Yeah.
So it's used during pregnancy, nothing to do. Yeah. This is like a huge amount of progesterone right at the beginning to revert. Yeah. The whole, but I mean, it is the theory of it. She's right.
He also talked about some studies, both a study that the LDH had done that was like a House resolution to look into this, where they were like, this is not a thing. And also, other studies that were done. But I'm going to let, what was his name? I'm like.
Cudahy?
No.
Cudahy was.
No, from LDH.
Cantor, Dr. Cantor.
Dr. Cantor. Thank you so much.
So we're asking the Department of Health to put on a website information that is not proven by ACOG to be scientific based.
There are concerns because the consensus from the medical community is that this remains an experimental treatment. And I believe the bar is not, what's being discussed to my understanding here is not whether or not physicians would be allowed to prescribe it or to treat patients. It's whether or not physicians would be required to specifically advise women that this is a bona fide treatment and to have that language posted on the website. But there was a randomized controlled trial started at UC Davis a couple years ago in 2019 to study exactly this, to give high-dose progesterone after the first of the 2 pills was given. This study was stopped prematurely. It was stopped prematurely because a preponderance of women bled out, had to go to the emergency department to get treated. When a trial is stopped early, it's a undeniable signal. It's a very loud signal that there's a giant safety issue here.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, like, even though they'd gone through, and the folks at UC Davis who did this study, then they are generally OBs that are on our side, I think, in full disclosure. But they're real scientists. They're real doctors. They really wanted to study this, and it was hard ethically to figure out who you could get to opt into it. But they figured it out. People that for sure had already decided to have an abortion. They were kept under strict medical care, like all of this stuff, and still the health consequences were so much that they did not believe that they could ethically continue the study. There was so much potential risk to the participants.
So that bill did, I think, it made it through the process. They did ultimately end up amending it so that information was just going to be printed on a piece of paper that was handed to someone at the abortion clinic rather than it. LDH was like, we're not putting this fucking shit on our website. But again, let's circle back to pregnancy information in schools. Like, what the Right to Life is obsessed with getting LDH to put fucking bullshit on their website.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they'll create a whole new website to post their nonsense.
His government should be used for misinformation, Michelle. That is the purpose of it, which I guess is of their, she already believes that's what government, she would have thought that this was true information, I guess. But yeah, just the sort of, not just with the bodily autonomy, but also with the government shouldn't be able to recommend anything, shouldn't be able to provide any information. But then also the government should be forced to put information on its website that the head doctor there, Dr. Cantor, is like, this is wildly experimental and in fact thought to be dangerous.
Yes. So that's crazy. And then, yes, they're like, okay, well, I guess we'll let it out of committee and you work with, LDH between here and the floor, and we'll figure something out. And then the very next bill that comes up is this bodily autonomy bill. Do you want to hear how she introduced that bill or how she talked about that bill? Because it's stupid.
Every medical procedure carries risk. Wherever there's risk, there must always be choice. This bill protects the right of an individual to accept or refuse any medical procedure that any state or local government might require. The bill does not prohibit the government from issuing emergency mandates. It simply says that if you don't want to comply with a required medical procedure, then you have to be allowed to opt out of that. Now, under a true emergency, if you opt out, you might face certain restrictions. The bill does not prohibit restrictions in that case. It simply says that wherever there's risk, there always has to be choice, and individuals always have the option to receive or to refuse medical treatments.
But people need the options, they need the choice.
Which also is, again, what Cantor was just saying with the wildly unsafe experimental, abortion reversal, that there's nothing in the law that says that doctors can't provide this protocol or can't recommend it. So that wasn't good enough in that situation. But in this situation, also, as someone who has refused medical care against medical wishes,
and the wishes of your friends.
But I'm talking about specifically when the tetanus shot, when I had fallen in the parade years ago and smashed my face, I had to go to the emergency room. I would not, and I said over and over again, I do not consent. I do not consent. I do not consent. And Blair was like, just please, just stitch her up and don't try not to scar her face. So in general, the point is that there are obviously some outlier situations where people will be forced to take medical care without against their wishes. They're pretty few and far between. Most of them were when we were in the midst of a public health crisis. And you didn't have to then, you just couldn't go everywhere, right? But like in general, what she's saying, you can do that. If you don't care if you die, if you don't care if, whatever, the government has a role in protecting people from themselves, but adults are kind of allowed to do what they want. Like there's just not that many scenarios where this shit is coming into play. Like what? Again, who in your community has been somewhere where they were like forced to, I mean, in an emergency, what she's talking about, she's like, it might not, that's because the person's unconscious. And then the doctor's like, they assume consent and they do what they believe to be reasonable. Yeah. Turns out later, maybe you wouldn't have wanted them to. Oops, like have some advanced directives.
They saved your life.
Have some advanced directives in place. I don't know. But like what else is happening like this where people are being forced medical care against their wishes, even if it's like would be in their best interest? I just don't think this is happening.
This is the theme. This is another theme that kind of runs throughout, and we can wrap it up here, which is what is the problem that she's trying to solve? There isn't one. There really is not a problem that she is legitimately trying to solve with almost any of her legislation.
Which is always the downfall of it, is that like it's always very, very broad and like potentially just a regular crazy person around there can read it and be like, this seems like that they could have some far-reaching implications. So why are we doing this? And then, she'll have either no examples or like nutty ones, like we've heard, where it's like, does that even fit into this? Or like, has that ever happened before? And if it did, would we need something this big to solve it? Doesn't the law already kind of provide for nutty people to do nutty things about medical care because they want to, or they want to, they've got ideas about their kids.
To, like, prohibit, like, like health agencies or doctors or schools from making some general rules that apply so that we can keep people safe. I mean,
and again, with like the really the nuttiest, and to me, if you think about it, it's just with the recommendations on the vaccine list that like a lot of parents are not going to otherwise know that is recommended. Then they can decide how they want to use that information. But if it's not on the list, then that's what's going to happen. They're not going to know to be like, oh, can I see the menu? The vaccine menu from last year. See if that one was different. It's just information then.
Yeah.
Wild, wild, wild.
So that is Beryl Amedee, and I think that our listeners will benefit from understanding her motivations, who she's talking to, who she's working with, how she is thinking about her legislative priorities, and also that if you see some stuff from Beryl that seems real fucking out there, you need to keep an eye on it. Because 2-3 years from now, Beth Meisel's going to introduce that shit. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I'm going to be waiting for what, if anything, emerges on the pathogens in the water. Well, right now, I mean, we have pathogens in our salad.
That's true.
Which is widely
attributed
to the FDA
government deregulation. Right, exactly. Anyway, we need to wrap things up because the World Cup game has already started. I'm late, so I got to get out of here. Okay. What are people supposed to do?
Thanks, everybody. Rate, review, and mostly subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your enemies.
That's right.
Seriously.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, sir.
Seriously is presented by Lift Louisiana, a nonprofit organization advocating for reproductive health rights and justice.